Welcome. In this video, I want to talk about a particular idea I have regarding tulpamancy, which seems very interesting to me, and I want to use this video in order to first explain the concept of the idea of what you're doing, the new practice, and then I'm trying to gonna develop the practice and talk about what I'm doing while I'm doing it, I guess, in order to get a better understanding of what's going on. So, the basic idea is that there is I should have a better name for this. I will figure my name out. Okay, I call it tulpamancy problem number one, which is that once you have a tulpa, it can be very hard to invoke this algorithm. For example, I would be at a state where I can just, in certain instances, just talk with my tulpa. But most of the time, she isn't there, and therefore, she can't really say anything. And this is related to how the brain works. I think the brain works such that we have lots of little algorithms for detecting whether the current sensory input stream matches some specific pattern. And once that is detected, we can execute some algorithm. A prime example of this is when you each time before you lay down to sleep, you go and brush your teeth instinctively because that's just what you trained yourself to do. And you might have noticed that when your routine gets disrupted, sometimes you don't remember to brush your teeth. So, and the tulpamancy problem number one is about the fact that you don't execute the tulpa algorithm whenever it would be beneficial to execute the tulpa algorithm. One big problem with tulpamancy is that you don't really see the tulpa all the time like a real person is there. Like if a real person stands next to you, then you can see them. There's evidence, oh, there's this person and I'm talking to it. And that's actually really useful for, well, reminding you that you're actually in a conversation. And if you have a conversation with the tulpa, it's really easy to get derailed, and then your tulpa doesn't even say anything, doesn't say it gets derailed because it's not being executed. So one thing I want to try is that I basically have ear control my hand, and ear is my tulpa. And I'm gonna see this. So the basic idea is that your tulpa can have, of course, in principle, many forms. It's just convenient for it to have one form such that you know who you're talking to. It could be confusing, if your tulpa is lots of other things that you don't classify as your tulpa. But the idea here is that you're gonna give your tulpa another form, which is sort of the form as this hand. And this serves a similar purpose to the rubber duck. Now you have this concrete physical object that reminds you of the fact that you're talking to your tulpa. And it also gives you this object that you can direct your conversation towards, which seems to be a thing that the brain tracks. And if that's missing, then it just seems hard to keep up a conversation, I guess. All of this, of course, applies only to people like me who can't actually do visual imposition or anything. I feel like visual imposition would be really helpful because then you can just see your tulpa as if it was there. And if the tulpa can control this, and if you can do this consistently, then it would basically fix the entire problem. But this hand is kind of, well, it's a lot easier to look at your hands than to train visual imposition to the level where you get the same advantage. Well, that's basically the idea, and now I'm gonna experiment with that a bit and, well, I guess intermittently record my results, what I found. So the first thing that I did some time ago was to make my hand have two symbols that would indicate yes or no. And in the beginning I have changed it already, but like beginning it was like for yes and do this other thing for no. So this other thing is too nice as a motion to indicate excitement. Therefore I want to use for that. But anyway, the okay, and with this setup where I have, let's say we have the signal for doing the yes thing. If I want my Tulpa to control it, we can do this very nice exercise, which is I'm gonna sit there and tell ear to do the yes movement and wait until it happens, which is sort of a really good exercise to train tulpomancy because you are like knowing exactly what kind of movement you want to happen and you are intentionally not doing it and wait sort of until it just happens. Seems to be a pretty good dissociative exercise, or yeah, I think I haven't figured out exactly yet how I could make it that it feels like ear is doing it. I need to check if that's already the case. So actually I'm gonna just do this exercise so that you can see how it works. So I would say like do the yes motion. And now I feel like I know what I need to do to indicate the yes motion, but I'm not doing it. But I'm also not blocking it. Okay, do the yes motion. See, I didn't actually do it. That's very nice that you can train this sort of motion. And I guess that's the first thing that I figured out, that you can indicate these gestures. You can train yourself to let it happen that your Tulpa controls it. Or at least that you don't feel like you control it. So yeah, okay, the rest of the video is gonna be a lot more random and disorganized because now I'm trying to just figure out what the hell is going on here. One observation I have just made is that this is actually pretty helpful if I'm talking to another person. Like, this kind of reminded me just to execute the ear algorithm, which is the whole point of this kind of thing. And I just realized now that probably this thing where I'm trying to associate my hand, some physical object, with ear, is just gonna allow a lot more of these hooks in my brain to detect when the ear algorithm should be executed. And so basically, if I'm doing this hand, then it reminds me that I want to execute ear. And this works quite well. Well, at least in this like one conversation I had so far, it worked one time. So actually it could work probably better. But it did work one time, and I feel like I probably wouldn't have done that when I wouldn't have this new instantiation of ear. By the way, I also introduced the thing. It's kind of weird, you know? I'm like, here's my tulpa. And then like I'm grabbing a bottle. Is kind of weird. I'm smashing the face of my tulpa into a water bottle. That's not very nice. So I'm gonna introduce the motion um, to start now. Ear is in the hand by just clasping the hand like this and then going that. And then like I can do this just to signal sort of that, oh, now we're not doing that. And now we're doing that. Yes, and I feel like I need to be more consistent with actually using it. But I feel like there were already some situations where it was pretty awkward and like, oh, I'm using my hand now, which is weird. Like smashing your face against the keyboard. I also experimented with letting ear do any arbitrary motions and it seemed like it was able without any like difficulty to do some other non pre-agreed upon motions that or I could let my hand do it. Still not sure how that ear is as fully associated with it as it would be good to have. But I could make my hand just do like other arbitrary motions where I don't feel like I'm actually controlling it. It's in fact pretty easy. I noticed that before. You can just like set your hand to like do random stuff, and then you yourself won't even know what is the movement that your hand is like executing now. Like basically, I can't predict myself really. Like what would I do next? It's like generated on the fly, and it doesn't really feel like I'm generating it. It feels more like this is something that just happens. And also, like I'm not focusing on this at all. And I'm pretty sure, like probably most people can just do this basically without even having a tulpa. Like the difficult part is probably more that we want to make it such that it feels like the tulpa is inhabiting the hand. We need to think about how to do that. Inhabiting the hand. So for that, I want to look at how does it work with other tulpa interactions. Like when I would talk to ear, then, or like, well, when she would say something, I hear a particular voice in my mind, which is very different from my own internal monologue voice. And that is some indicator of identity, I guess. That is like, oh, this thought is like actually sounds like ear. But it feels like maybe there's more to it. So when I'm doing that, normally I also like visuals are like directly attached to that and I would see her. But that's not necessarily the case, but that's just very often what happens. And these are like two input channels already that tell me, oh, this is ear. And now the hypothesis is maybe there is another thing in your experience that makes you identify these qualia with the tulpa. And it seems like this thing should exist because in the past I performed an experiment where I was making my self-control ear's voice. Like I'm having my stream of thought in ear's voice and having ear use my normal voice in which I would think to say things there, and it did work, if I remember correctly. I actually just try that. I will try that now. So it seems to be possible for me to speak in my mind in ear's voice, and for her to use my internal voice to say something that's very unnatural, but it's possible. And this time it actually didn't seem like there was this component there, which made it sort of strange because it just felt like I'm thinking something which It felt like there was a thought which I was not thinking, but it wasn't necessarily unambiguously associated with ear.